the biggest, scariest decisions I ever made, moving across the world, becoming a solo mum at 41, and building and moving into my tiny house, completely changed my life. They weren't easy, and they were definitely not conventional, but they taught me who I really am. And so in this video, I'm going to share with you what those three decisions were, and why I made them, and also the strategies that I used to make them, despite the fact that I was overwhelmed and I was scared, but I still did it. So the first big decision started in 1994. At the end of 1994, I had been in a job for about 6 years by then, and I worked for a college for hospitality management. And at the end, so December 1995, just before we went on Christmas break, I went to see my boss, and I told him that at the end of the next semester, I was going to leave, because I had decided that I wanted to move to another country and live and work there for a while. 6 months earlier, I had ended a long-term relationship, and that had given me this sense of freedom. I'd never had any urge to leave the Netherlands, but for some reason I wanted to have that experience. And I thought I would just go for a year, and just be completely in a different environment. It had to be a country where they spoke English, because my work was in English, and it had to be somewhere where I couldn't go home for just the weekend. So I was looking at the US, Canada, some of the Caribbean islands, although that wasn't very likely to be a place where I could work, but anywhere but far away. So I did realize that I hadn't given notice. So if I'd changed my mind, that would have been absolutely fine, and they would have very happily kept me. But what was interesting was that by, first of all, announcing it. So and I didn't just tell my manager, who by the way then said, okay, well, then you can recruit your replacement and train your replacement. Although at that point I hadn't given notice yet, but he sort of planted that seed. But I also started talking to other people about it, and I don't know if you've ever worked in a workplace like this, but my manager knew, and then before I knew it, everybody knew what was going on. Even the students knew what my plan was. And the interesting thing about that was that it set in motion a chain of events that landed me in Australia. Because I was working with a colleague who was Australian, and she was there on a temporary basis. She knew someone who owned a private college here in Australia. Now, you have to know, Australia was not on my radar. I knew nothing about Australia. I'd never been here. But so she knew someone who owned a private college here in Australia. And he happened to be in Europe doing a trip of various hospitality colleges, and they were going to meet up for drinks. And she had another appointment first, and she said to me, oh, can you just spend some time with him and keep him occupied until I arrive. And so we were in the school bar, and we're having a drink, and he asked me what I was teaching, and then I was talking about that, and then he said, oh, can you teach these subjects? And he rattled off 3, and I said, yes, that they're exactly my area. And he said, would you like a job in Australia? And before I even thought about what he had just asked me, I said yes, because without any consideration. And so that then meant that I had 6 weeks to get my work visa sorted. They sponsored my work visa to get rid of all my stuff, empty up my apartment, and get myself ready. And 6 weeks later, I was in Australia. And I think how that and that was definitely not where I thought I would be. And so I had made a deal with myself that I had to stay for a year because it was partly about personal growth and taking risk, because I wasn't a major risk taker, and to really put myself outside my comfort zone. And interestingly, as soon as I arrived in Australia, I felt like I'd come home. I felt more at home here, despite the fact that things were different and I struggled to understand Australian English. I really found it really difficult to understand when people are speaking. But I felt more at home here than I'd ever felt in the Netherlands. Not that I never felt at home, but I didn't know any different. And so 4 months in, I called my mum and I said, I'm going to apply for permanent residency. I'd made the deal with myself that I had to stay a year, but I didn't want to go back. And so after almost 2 years of lots of legal stuff, I became a permanent resident, and that is almost 30 years ago. So on my own, to completely the other part of the world where I didn't know anyone, where I'd never been before. So what made me capable of making that decision? And I think what I learned from that particular decision is, one, I am very good at saying yes to things before I've fully sorted out all the details. It's not that I'm not prepared or I haven't done my research, because the moving overseas, I thought about it a lot. I knew exactly what it needed to have, but I hadn't worked out the nitty-gritty details yet. So I said yes to something and then assumed that the details would take care of itself. The other thing that I learned from that experience is that when you share your decision with people, or what you would like what your dream is, then a couple of things happen. One, I felt by talking to a lot of people about my plan to move to another country and live and work there for a while, I felt that I created a sort of an accountability to those people that I told about. As if they would hold me accountable for that decision. Of course they wouldn't. Nobody would sort of force me to continue on this path if I decided for some reason not to go. But it felt like it, because I'd made it public, made the whole idea public. I felt like I had more of a push to try and make it work, because that's what I told the world that I was going to do. The second thing that I noticed is when you start telling people about what your dream is, people are mostly encouraging. There were a few people that thought it was strange, and Dutch people are very comfortable giving you their opinion about things, which I've learned later is not necessarily the case in other countries. But most people are very encouraging, and if they can, they will support. This is why my colleague told me later that she thought that this was someone I should meet, because he potentially would know of opportunities for me to get some work in Australia. She didn't know that he had a job that he couldn't fill in Australia, but that just happened to be a lucky coincidence. But people are very supportive and very willing. If they know something, then they do. I've told some students that I was planning, and one of the students got back to me, and she had a contact on one of the on a Caribbean island that was looking in a hotel that was looking for a learning and development person, but it had to be in French. But she was happy to introduce us, but it would have been in French. And although I I did French in high school, I wasn't fluent. So, but people are very happy to help. So the reason that dream came true, that big decision was I could make, was because I said yes when an opportunity came along, and I told the world, and therefore I felt I had to follow through on it because I felt like I was being held accountable. And when opportunities did come along, I recognized them as opportunities. So that was the first big decision, and that got me to Australia. Became a permanent resident. I came here in my early 30s. And as I approached my 40s, I became more and more aware of the fact that I really wanted children. I'd had a few not really good relationships, even one quite abusive. And in hindsight, I realized that the reason I kept trying these relationships with people was that I really wanted children. Now, in the Netherlands, the concept of a single mother by choice or solo mum was not common, but it was a thing. And I knew about it. A lot of people knew about it. And so I'd always thought that would be an option. And so as I approached my 40s here and I was starting to feel the biological clock ticking, I felt I wanted to see if it was possible here. Initially, I thought it wasn't. And then I happened to hear, I was at a get-together of some sort, and somebody I knew, I heard her talk to someone else about how she had just started this process of becoming a solo mum. And so I kind of waited for her to finish that conversation. And then I said, you need to tell me more. How is that? How are you doing that here? And she said, it's very easy. You need to have a GP, a general practitioner, who gives you a referral to an IVF clinic. And there you go. You take it from there. I got her GP details, and the next morning had made an appointment to see this GP, who gave me a referral to the IVF clinic, which, how do these things work? The IVF clinic was just one street over from where I lived. It was a 2-minute walk. And then I started on that journey and went through IVF, which is the hardest thing I've ever done. I don't know if any of you have been through IVF or know someone or who's going through IVF, but it was definitely much harder than moving to the other side of the world on my own. But at the end of that, just before I turned 42, I gave birth to my lovely daughter Malu, and there's a video where we talk about us moving into the tiny house together. So the difference with this big decision as compared to the previous one, moving to overseas and coming here to Australia, I did not tell a lot of people about what I was planning. The people that I was really good, my family knew, some very close friends knew, but it wasn't one of those things that I was making public. I didn't need to get the sense of accountability. But I found it very overwhelming. And what got me to continue on this journey was that I only ever looked at the next small step in this process. And if you know about IVF, it is a process. And it can be, for me, I started it in September 2003, and I fell pregnant in July 2004. So it was a long process with 4 artificial inseminations and 3 IVF attempts. Very tough. And so it's very much a process. So all I did was to not be overwhelmed and not be it completely did kind of, but overwhelm, take over my life. I just focused on the next small step. Even getting into this process, it was um, just what can I do today that will get me a little bit closer. And it initially had to do with research. It had to do with who do I need to talk to, who do I need to make an appointment with, and then once I was in the whole process, then the doctors and the nurses dictate the process. But I just focus on the next small step, because the thing about big decisions and trying to reach your dream, it is very overwhelming, and it's such a big thing that sometimes you just don't know where to start, and it feels just too much, and therefore a little step at a time. So that was my second big decision, and in terms of getting to the dream, really the hardest of the three decisions. And of course, the third big decision I made was to build and live in a tiny house on wheels. And I have to tell you, compared to the previous two, this was easy. This was joyful. This was very different. Very little stress, except when I was was ready to move in, and I wasn't sure about where the parking spot situation. But other than that, the whole getting to the dream was easy. Again, I told people about it, and if it hadn't been during the COVID lockdowns, I think I would have had a lot of support and a lot of people willing to come and help, because everybody was very interested. A lot of people said that they could never live in a small space like that, but everybody was really most people love the idea of the tiny house living. So, but again, it was a big thing. So there was a lot to do, and I had no skills and I had no experience, so it felt overwhelming. But one, there was no necessarily a time pressure to it, and two, I really took it just one little step at a time. I had to project manage, I had to think ahead, and I had to try and come up with some sort of approach. But really, I just did one little thing at a time, and lots of little steps make a long journey. So in the end, I got to live here. So what these three big changes, big decisions in my life have taught me about myself and about who I really am is, one, I am not really very worried and concerned about what people think of me. If people don't agree with what I'm doing, or that's kind of water off a duck's back. So I'm not very much influenced by other people's thoughts and opinions. And when they say, that they could never live in a tiny house like this, or they could never move to the other side of the world, I go, well, that's you. I might not agree. I think if you really put your mind to it, you could, but that's fine. So that's one thing. I don't really consider other people's opinions as such in my decision making. I trust my own. The second thing that I've learned about what is important, so the strategies or how to make your dream come true, is, first of all, that they're overwhelming. So this focus on what's one little thing I can do today that gets me a little bit closer. For none of these big decisions did I ever sort of wait until I had all my ducks in a row. I just did little things that I You know, like when I thought that I might need to consider a different housing option, one day I just did some research. Um, and I decided tiny houses might be the way to go. I had a question, and that was, are there tiny house builders in Australia? And so one day I looked that up. And it's interesting once you've then got an answer to that question. And I had done that little step, which was a 5-minute Google search. Then the next step was, okay, maybe go and explore their website and work out what costs are involved. So tiny little steps as I went through, and that really um, helps reduce the overwhelm. And the good thing about these tiny steps is that they don't commit you to anything. Just because I googled tiny house builders in Australia did not mean that suddenly I was signed and sealed, right? I didn't have to go with a tiny house on wheels. It was just the first little step, but it gets you a bit further forward. So if you're struggling, being overwhelmed when it comes to this big dream that you have about something you want to do or achieve, or what's one little thing you can do today, and do that and see where that takes you. And then the next day, what's one little thing you can do today that will get you a little bit closer to your dream. The other strategy that worked for getting to Australia and for the tiny house, it was that I told people about it. Again, it doesn't commit you to anything, but I did find that it gave me a bit more of a push to try and get closer to that dream, because I thought, I was being kept accountable. Which, as I said, if I had gone away again from tiny houses, nobody would have batted an eyelid. If I hadn't left the Netherlands, nobody would have batted an eyelid. But it's that sense of, if people know that that's what I'm thinking about, then, well, there is that sense of accountability. But even more importantly, it opens up the opportunity for other people to support, to encourage, to help. If they have information, or they have ideas, or they have contacts that might be helpful, people are very willing to share, are very willing to help. People like being helpful. So by telling people what I was trying to do, and even telling them about what I didn't know, or what information I needed, or what I was worried about, there was this support, or at least people willing to think along with me, which was really, really helpful. And the third thing that I learned from all of this is that a dream is a dream, and it never works out exactly as you were dreaming. And you should be okay with that. I really, as I said, Australia and New Zealand even less. Australia was not on my radar as a country to move to, let alone stay for the rest of my life. But because the opportunity came along and it kind of fitted most of my criteria, I went, oh okay, I'll see how that goes. Why not? When it came to having a child on my own, it didn't go exactly as I planned or how I had it in my mind. The child that I have is fantastic, but I'm sure, I can't remember what I thought it would be like, but the whole thing was definitely not what I thought it was going to be like. I had these beautiful images of how the birth was going to go. Well, it didn't happen like that at all, because I had to have an emergency cesarean, because she was not willing to come out. So same with the tiny house. In a lot of ways, it worked out the way I thought, but at the same time, it's very different from that that image that I had of living, of building the tiny house. I definitely thought I would be much quicker with fitting it out. I thought it would be done in 6 months, and it took me 2 years to get the whole house fitted out. I thought I would pick up the skills much quicker. I thought a lot of the things that were easier, but they turned out to be hard, and the things that I thought would be hard were a lot easier. I thought I'd be frustrated more, whereas I really enjoyed it when I had to problem solve. So the journey was completely different, and even the living in it is better but different from the dream. So when you have a big dream, don't be too wedded to the pictures that you currently have in your head as to what it will be like, because it will be different. Doesn't make it less valuable and life-changing and fantastic, but it will be different. So I hope this is kind of inspiring, and some of you, if you have big dreams, because we should never stop dreaming. I still have big dreams, and I hope to get started on one of those dreams this year, in which case I will tell you, and you can hold me accountable, but you can also come in with lots of thoughts and ideas. I'm not going to tell you yet because I need the finances sorted first. But once that is the case, so tell people so that they can support you, and that you have it out there in the ether, right? In the universe, and opportunities, you will recognize opportunities when they come along. Also, don't wait until you have it all sorted to take action towards making that dream come true. Do something small every day, so that you see that little progress. Because even if you have a list of questions, start looking for answers to those questions, because every time you get that little bit further, one, you get more questions that you need answered, but also you feel like you're getting that little bit closer to your dream, and that is motivating. That's what dreams are. They are something that you expect to make your life fantastic. So it's worth it. It's worth the time and energy investment, but just take it little steps at a time. It's like the saying, how do you eat an elephant? Well, one little bite at a time. So a big dream is a big elephant, but yeah, one bite at a time. So that's, dream big, but just don't stop at dreaming. No matter where you are in life, dreams are worth pursuing. Thanks for watching. See you next time.